Mattel. Why did it have to be Mattel? Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. You may have heard that Mattel is taking back the license for DC toys. As an action figure content creator who primarily focuses on DC Multiverse, I have lots of thoughts and feelings. But first, how did we get here? Mattel had the DC license from 2003 to 2019. They started out with figures based on the new Batman adventures, as well as Justice League. Then they started their own 6-inch Batman line. This grew into a Batman and Superman specific line called DC Superheroes, which eventually became DC Universe Classics. During this time, they also made products for DC cartoons and movies. While all of this was going on, DC was also releasing products to comic and hobby shops through DC Direct. In 2020, the master DC license was spliced between two companies. Spin Master would make products more targeted toward kids, while McFarlane Toys would give us more adult collectibles, though Mattel did still make toys for preschool age kids. Eventually, McFarlane got the rights to do DC Direct, which includes things like statues or re-releasing figures from Batman the Animated Series. Now, the license is going back to Mattel, so let's just start with the actual press release. Mattel Incorporated and Warner Brothers Discovery Global Consumer Products today announced a global multi-year licensing agreement utilizing DC's entire library of beloved characters and legendary storytelling. Through the partnership, Mattel is awarded the global licensing rights to develop and market a full range of DC-themed action figures, playsets, accessories, role-play products, and adult collectibles starting in the second half of 2026. The agreement spans all DC stories and characters including Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the Joker, Harley Quinn, and many more. My first takeaway is that they do clearly want us to know that they are making collector-grade figures, which is encouraging. Seeing, for example, what Playmates is doing with Power Rangers, and I was a little bit concerned. Most of us have been focusing on DC Multiverse, but the wording here makes me think that Spin Master is going to be out too. With the release of their Batman Forever collection and also the promise of a new retro line, I'm actually kind of bummed about that. To be honest, there was a part of me that was kind of hoping that Spin Master might even take over superpowers at some point. Back to the press release though, and there is one quote that kind of stuck out to me. This is from someone named Robert Oberschlepp, who is the head of Warner's global products. He says, "What Mattel really brought was a very clear understanding of our brand." Now, maybe I'm reading into this, but it does kind of feel like maybe they're throwing a little bit of shade at McFarlane. The one thing I do want to point out is that toy companies just don't give their licenses away. Any company that wants to have a license for something like DC does have to pitch their vision. They also have to bid. For me, the main takeaway is that whatever Mattel was offering, DC clearly liked it more than what McFarlane and Spin Master were. So, with that being said, obviously a lot of us are going to have some very mixed feelings. But understanding that process, and part of it's just being able to have a frank conversation about McFarlane toys and some of its shortcomings. For one thing, since the very first wave, we've been talking about scaling issues. And that's one thing that hasn't gotten any better. There's always been frustration over the character selection, especially the lack of female characters. Another thing that comes up a lot right here on this channel is frustration over poor reuse choices. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that reuse in general is bad. Reuse is one of the staples of action figures. I'm talking about reuse that just doesn't make sense for a specific character, or more often, not updating the tooling so the characters end up having details that they just plain shouldn't. In the last couple of years at least, one of the biggest issues has been distribution. Pre-orders that just sell out instantly, certain figures being near impossible to find in stores, and then add to that the Platinum Editions, and now the Red Platinum Editions that make it even harder to find. Now that's not to say that Mattel didn't have issues, or that it doesn't still have issues now. DC Universe Classics had a lot going for it, but these were figures with very limited articulation, few if any accessories, flat, lifeless faces, and all that's to say nothing about Mattel from a business end. Companies like Hasbro and McFarlane do a pretty good job of staying in communication with their customers. Historically, that's not the case with Mattel. Not only that, but in the past they have been downright hostile to content creators and YouTubers. For those who don't know, a couple of years ago there was a bit of a scandal in the toy world. A couple of dinosaur-themed channels accidentally got products early, and so they made videos about it. But because they got those figures before Street Date, Mattel responded by having the channels taken down. Now, Mattel did eventually backtrack backtrack and the channels were restored, but it did reveal just how litigious Mattel can be. It also ended up exposing that they have corporate spies and lawyers lurking around people's comments. Not gonna lie, it makes me a little bit anxious. This brings me to how I feel as a content creator. If I can be open and maybe even a bit vulnerable with you, I've got some pretty big concerns. DC Multiverse is some of the most popular content on my channel, so part of me is kind of scared that if DC Multiverse goes away, a lot of y'all are gonna go away with it. And please, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that you owe me your views, but if you mainly watch this channel for DC Multiverse and you're not interested in what Mattel's doing, I can't hold it against you if you don't really follow along anymore. I get it, even something like head swaps. I'll be real with you, I actually got a little choked up the other day when I was working on the Platinum Edition Christopher Reeve head swaps. Head swaps are one of the main things I do on this channel, but with a new collection there's not going to be a whole lot of heads to swap. And that's assuming that these new Mattel figures are going to have swappable heads. A lot of Mattel figures don't. And that brings me to my thoughts and feelings as a collector. I have invested a lot of time and a lot of money into DC Multiverse, so I know that a lot of you feel the same way when I say that I'm not really excited about having to start over. Now, from a speculator standpoint, aftermarket prices are going to probably go up, which could be really good for you if you're into selling. But for me, I would have much rather McFarlane continue to improve and keep going. On the other hand, the cynical part of me wonders if that level of improvement I'm looking for was ever going to happen. Looking at some of the pictures that came out at Toy Fair, and some of those issues I've been talking about are still right there on display. Weird head choices, terrible reuse, like the new Supergirl still having Nightfall Catwoman's stomach, just like the Target version. Or characters that I would be excited for, like Starman being a red platinum, so I'll probably never find him. Yeah, I'm excited that we're getting Hawkgirl, but look closely and you'll realize that she's reuse of Wonder Woman, and if Power Girl is any indication, that means she might end up towering over Hawkman. And now the DC Multiverse is winding down, my fear is that they're just going to coast with no incentive to improve or wrap up the collection. With all that in mind, maybe just hitting the reset button isn't a bad idea. So for now, I'm choosing to hope for the best. Was DC Universe Classics everything I could have wanted? No, but that was years ago. Just because Mattel did it one way back then doesn't mean that's how they're going to do it now. Looking at the Masterverse line, I see smart reuse, good articulation, even pinless double jointed knees and elbows. There's also a lot more variety, including female characters, and some characters with wired cloth goods capes. And that gives me hope that Mattel might continue what McFarlane started. And then looking at some of the wrestling figures, they seem to have pretty good likenesses, and also some good soft goods. Stepping back from how I feel as an adult collector, we know that they're going to make some great kids toys because, well, they did in the past, and until we hear from McFarlane Toys, we don't know where they stand regarding DC Direct. If they still have that, they might be able to continue making some figures. And yeah, I'm concerned as a content creator, but I'm also a little excited. This announcement has given me loads of ideas for upcoming videos, and hey, if nothing else, we've got a lot of verses to look forward to. So that's where I am. Mixed emotions, concerned, excited, but trying to be positive. How about you? How do you feel about this announcement? What do you hope to see out of a new Mattel line? Tell me everything in the comments below, and until next time, play nice and have fun.